Floor is yours.
This is Committee Chair Nathan Brucey calling to order the meeting of the Public Works Committee. Thank you all for joining us via Zoom. I very much look forward to the day when we can all meet in person. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Brucey here. Mr. Brusky's here.
Here.
Mr. O'Brien.
Here.
Mr. Reinhardt.
Here.
Mr. Cleary.
Here.
Mr. Peter.
Here.
Mr. Bergdorf.
Here.
Mr. Purley.
Here.
Mr. Fine. And Mr. Smith. 7 are present.
Thank you very much. All right, our first order of business on our rather short agenda today is to approve the previous meeting minutes.
Motion,
Get a
Mr.
motion
Chair.
from that. See a motion by Mr. Peter. Can I get a second? Seconded by Mr. Bergdorf. All in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say no. Thank you very much. That carries unanimously. All right, on our two items we have on our agenda today, the first is an item authorizing an agreement with Callahan Industries regarding the design and construction services for the County Road 303 and 311 Beaver Dam Road Highway Improvement Project. Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is the lowest bidder out of 5. The award is to Callahan Industries. It is a full rehabilitation of along County Route 303 and 311, and includes everything from the guardrails to the roadway itself, including the smaller culverts for driveways and things of that nature, and then of course all of the signage and striping as well. And it's an amount not to exceed $2 million and change.
Outstanding. Yes, I saw that all the bids were quite close together, but I always feel like I have to ask, do you have any concerns that the lowest bidder here cannot perform the contract as is written?
No, I'm sure some other members know the gentleman, Bill Anslow, in our DPW department does a very good job making sure to comb through all the bids with a fine tooth comb, and has, I think, 30 plus years of experience in the department. So has a pretty good idea of how long these sort of projects take, and always follows up with the awarded bidder, whether it be lowest or otherwise, to make sure that they can handle it.
Outstanding.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I recognize Mr. Bergdorf.
Mike, I'm well acquainted with this project because we did all the preliminary steps over the last 2 years.
Yep.
But obviously, given the potential fiscal situation of the county and the capital plan, obviously this wouldn't be on here unless we thought it was necessary. Could you just sort of elaborate as put on the record why it's necessary, as we're, sort of waiting to figure out where we are?
I actually can't elaborate as to why it is necessary. That's probably something better that I can get from DPW, but I can tell you that basically right now, any project that's being put forth, all RLAs that are being put forth, not just capital related projects, are kind of falling into the category of most essential. And that's for a host of reasons, whether the fiscal considerations, the process considerations, frankly, to make everybody's life a little bit easier right now. But I can get more. I assure you that Commissioner Thalen and his team, as well as leadership in all departments, are kind of looking at every single thing that comes across their desk with a much more detailed eye. Not that they didn't before, but for obvious reasons. So I can get you some language.
Well, I think, I guess what I was hoping you can put into the record is, I've known we've seen this over the last 2 or 3 years. We did a preliminary design. There was some major road failures out there. And I don't know if, I know Jeff probably understands, and Chris Smith, how important this is. I was just hoping to get some of that on the record.
Yeah, my understanding is this isn't necessarily for repair beyond normal wear and tear on the routes, but I understand what you're saying. What I can do is I'll follow up to see if maybe this does have some sort of intersection with, no pun intended, with the type of thing that you're referring to.
No, but I absolutely want to support it, but I just, when somebody says, this is 100% county share.
Yep.
I think we ought to understand that, it's a critical item.
No, it's a question that we're asking a lot every day, so that's no problem.
Yeah.
I get that for you.
Okay, super. In that case, I would move it.
Second.
As we have a motion by Mr. Bergdorf, second by Mr. O'Brien. All in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no and raise your hand. That carries unanimously. All right. Our final item for the evening is item 3, authorizing a master agreement with National Grid regarding energy conservation and management services for the water purification district. This is to replace a boiler. Is that right?
I believe Angelo is actually on. I was expecting to present this, but if Angelo is still there, by all means, Angelo, take it away, my friend.
Yep. So this agreement is with National Grid and specifically for the boiler replacement. In January, our boiler at our North plant failed. So we were talking to a couple different engineers about a method to kind of get it replaced in an expedited fashion. This boiler is just providing building heat, so currently is not needed in the summertime. So in kind of talking through that process, we were made aware of the National Grid program, and there are rebates available to us, but essentially this would act as a design bid almost, where Grid would actually have the contracts directly with the engineer and or the contractor for the services, and it just it gives us an avenue to kind of expedite the replacement of the unit and potentially qualify us for rebate money that potentially is in line, given that we think we can downsize the boiler and save a little bit of energy long term.
Outstanding. And I hear from the council's office that this is also, there's a greening component here. I guess this new boiler is more efficient than our past one. Is that right?
Right. So the existing boiler was original to the facility, so circa 1973, 74. So any unit we put in is going to be certainly more efficient. And then compounded on that is the potential that we think we can actually downsize the unit. So the existing unit was a 400 horsepower boiler. We think we could probably step it down to about half of that size. So there is going to be an energy savings likely just by the replacement of the unit from an efficiency perspective and the sizing perspective.
Mr. Chairman.
I recognize Mr. Bergdorf.
Angelo,
Yep.
when anybody ever says design build, that is a wonderful construction delivery system, but usually it's specifically authorized by the legislature under certain circumstances. Is this really design build, or are we sole sourcing to Niagara Mohawk?
It's sole sourced through National Grid, but there's a bidding process through that. So they reach out to 3 different vendors that can provide the services. So there's a bidding component to that, but we as the county are contracted directly through Grid.
Okay, and that passed muster with how competitive there are lots of projects. I've been involved in a bunch of design build projects, and most of them needed specific legislative authorization, or they had to have a certain structure. I just want to make sure that you
we vetted it through purchasing and then through law, and because I think Grid is our primary energy supplier, they didn't have an issue doing it that way.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Recognize
Motion to
Mr.
move.
Peter.
Oh, yeah, I just want to, I've done several projects like this with the energy provider, and it's a great way to both speed up the projects, but make sure, you're getting the most efficient model. So, good job by, the county in getting this done. I'd make a motion to move this if there's no other questions.
Second.
Motion. We have Mr. Reinhardt first.
I just want to follow up a little bit on what Matt Peter just said. I want to make sure that when we go and get the bids, we have some options in terms of not just the size of the boiler, let's say 250 horsepower or whatever they're going to go out for, but that there are different models that have different efficiencies, and we want to make sure that the life cycle cost of what we purchase is the best. So for example, we might actually buy a model through this process that is not the cheapest for that size capacity, might be a little bit more expensive, but if it's a lot more efficient, and if, for example, maybe it gets us to a higher level of rebate, we may want to consider that so that we buy the most efficient model that makes economic sense over the life of the project, not just first cost. That's an important consideration when you're looking at boilers.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think the other thing too with that is obviously with the digester project, we want a unit that can run on biogas as well. So really the first task of this work is really doing an evaluation for what potential boiler options are out there, and then doing a energy comparative to the existing unit. But to your point, yeah, that will be considered under the essentially the design effort that's going to take place initially.
Right.
Good.
Will this ever have to come back to us again?
No, this should be it. So once we basically enter into an agreement with Grid, they hold the contracts directly with the vendors.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. O'Brien,
there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Peter to move this.
pending any questions?
I'm
from the
seconding that.
Committee. So we have Mr. Peters' motion, second by Mr. O'Brien. All in favor to move, say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no and raise your hand. Seeing none, it carries unanimously. All right, that concludes our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
By Mr. Peter, seconded by Mr. O'Brien. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Be safe.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Patrick, are you there still?
Hold on one second.